welcome to episode number 2 of Coding the AI Chronicles.
Hello, welcome back. I got a confession to make, Ted. I built my own test framework.
I saw. And I was like, I am not surprised. I am not surprised.
I'm not sure if I should take that as a compliment or not a compliment that you're not surprised.
It's very on brand for you, so
that's still not a compliment.
It's totally a compliment.
All right, I'll take it.
Hey, Astrid, welcome.
Hey, Astrid. So I thought this could be, an interesting segue into a conversation about buy versus build, because of the one thing that you shouldn't ever need to build is a test framework. Because everybody has built a test framework, and there are so many test frameworks. So
there are so many more for JavaScript than there are for Java. Like Java is pretty much like, JUnits pretty much covers everything. There's testing and G that was popular for a little while, although it's gotten much less. And I think that's basically it, other than somebody hand built something. But JavaScript, there's like 10 that I could probably name, and I'm not a JavaScript developer. Yeah,
there's so many. When I first started doing this, I used test unit, and that wasn't very good, and I ended up having to switch at great expense. Then I used Mocha, and then for this series, I tested. I looked at Playwright, decided it wasn't a good fit. Tested Vitest and Jest, and the built-in Node Runner, and forgot about Jasmine, so I didn't do that one. And then after all of that and spending several days looking at all the different options and spiking that, I don't know if you've got the code up yet, but I actually, you look at the branches for the source code repository, you can see all the spikes for all the different things that I tried. After all of that, I ended up deciding to build my own, which is not for to be honest, I didn't do it for this series. I actually built my own test framework last year for my main production website. And so, but I didn't, for this series, I didn't want to bring that in because I thought people want to see sort of standard stuff. I don't want them to look at me funny and say things like, that's very on brand for you. So yeah, Cucumber, that's not really a unit testing framework.
Yeah, that's more of a language. I mean, there is a framework underneath, but it sort of relies on other stuff. Hey, Jay Basusi.
Jay, good to see you. Well, that's the thing. So Jay says in the chat, it's not hard to write a basic unit test framework. And that was my thinking last year when I did this. So the reason I did this is I've been using Mocha in my production code base for years and years and years, ever since I switched from test unit, back in 2014 or something. And Mocha's problem is that it's not really designed to be run programmatically. So I have this incremental build, which you change a file and it will only rerun. It will do an analysis of the dependencies of the source tree, which is also not as hard as it sounds. You just, basically look for import statements, and then you can build a tree that describes the dependencies. And then when a file changes, you go back up that tree and say which tests are associated with that file.
Right.
So I was doing that sort of dependency analysis because my code had gotten to the point where now it's got something like 1,100 tests, maybe 1,200, I don't know. But it was getting to the point where the sort of dumb approach of breaking it up into different pieces and only running the ones that have changed was breaking down.
Yeah, that doesn't scale at that level. Yeah.
It does not, no. And so I wanted to be able to do this dependency analysis, and I programmed that. And what was happening was Mocha was failing. If you mark a test as skipped in Mocha, it will tell you that test run was successful. But what I want to have happen was when, to keep running those skipped tests until they're no longer skipped, and then it comes through. I was basically getting tests that weren't running because of this sort of interaction with the skipped thing as I made changes.
Right.
It's not so much if you mark it skipped as if you mark another test as only, it will only run that one test. It'll skip everything else. And then when you stop marking it as only, then it will consider all the tests that have previously were skipped as now being successful, even though it hasn't run them, for quite a while.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah. And then also it had problems with memory leaks and all this other stuff. And so
yeah, it's been around for a long time, so that doesn't surprise me.
It was like, screw it. How hard could it be?
How hard could it be?
It wasn't that hard. It took me about a week of part-time work.
Yeah.
And then I had my own test runner that actually has the only and skip mechanics I want and tells me which files are actually completely 100% working. Mm-hmm. So then I can incrementally say, don't run those again unless they change.
Right.
But so for the stream, I thought, well, that's probably not great. Let's go ahead and run it. Let's go ahead and try out these other things so people don't look at me funny. And what happened was they were all really slow. I actually put this on Mastodon. I have a bookmark, and let me see if I can find that. I described my reasoning on Mastodon, and there's really three reasons: ergonomics, test output, and speed. And the ergonomics is: do you have the dot only? Do you have the dot skip? And right away, Jest and Vitest and the node test library were all out of the running, because if you mark a test as only, it will only run that test in that file, but it'll still run all the tests in all the other files. And that's because they do parallel builds, but they do them. I can do parallel builds and it's not a problem. So I don't know what their issue is.
Right.
But I know what's going on with the node stuff, because they don't have the concept of test suites. They just have tests that can contain tests, which you can't discover if a test is marked only until you run the test that contains it.
Oh, okay. I'm a bit disappointed in Vitest because or Vitest, I don't know how they pronounce it, because I know it's Vite, V-I-T-E.
I always thought it was Vite, but I don't know.
That I've heard it pronounced anyway. But I was, because like I like the other stuff that's come out of that sort of area, but it just sounds like it's one of those, let's just copy Mocha, but we'll do some improvements, rather than thinking from sort of what do we need from a testing, but also like what's the style of testing that they're doing will obviously impact that, and clearly they're not doing what you would like to do.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's really what it comes down to, is I'm opinionated.
Yeah.
But I really liked Vitest or Vitest, however it's pronounced. And that was going to be my go-to. I was like, oh yeah, this is really good. I don't remember if it had the dot only issue or not. I think it did. But the other thing is you need to be fast. So my target build time is 1 second.
Right.
And so any overhead that you have from running the tests is takes away from that. And Jest was at 0.4 seconds. No test was fantastic at 0.18 or something like that. I've got it in here. But Vitest, 1.4 seconds to run one test.
That really surprised me, because like one of the things that I know from the Vite project is it's super fast, but that sucks.
So I think what's happening there is that it's having to spin up, and it's a really big framework. All these frameworks have built-in like cross compilation, because nobody does, there's no Unix philosophy in JavaScript.
Right.
There's no, I'm going to build a piece build out of components. Everybody wants a kitchen sink thing that does everything.
Right.
So Vitest will transpile your TSX for you. Jest will transpile your TSX for you, all this stuff.
Right.
And when you have that much complexity, there's just a really big parsing and loading cost.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I decided to use the one that I had built as a result of that, because Mocha, it just doesn't have great output, and I found it kind of flaky in the past, and the other ones just don't work in terms of the ergonomics. And the output was okay. They were a little too fancy. Like they'd put a little excerpt of the code with an arrow pointing to the thing that failed. I just need a stack trace.
Right.
Like just give me a stack trace.
Right.
That's all I need.
Yeah.
So in the end, what we've got here is I do have this working now. So you can make a change to, for example, hello TSX, and it will run that. And once we're in the quick build, in the incremental build, it will take about half a second.
Mhm.
And that's because I haven't completely gotten it incremental.
Right.
Because the compiler is compiling everything. So the tester is thinking, well, everything's changed. So I was working on that before the stream, and I got really close to having that fixed, but I'm not quite there yet. But
that whole process would have made a really interesting stream, or at least an interesting stream to at least one person.
Yeah. Hey, wait, well, yes, dark mode. Yeah, it's been kind of fun. I didn't think folks would be that interested, so I didn't suggest that we do it on stream. It would probably taken quite a while. Like I've been working on it on and off for the past week. So we probably would have spent 3 or 4 episodes on it. And it's not really what the AI Chronicles.
Yeah, no, I'm saying like you should have, on your own stream, like just do it live.
Yeah,
it's sort of the habit that I've gotten into. Like I actually I'm working on my ensembler tool because I need to add wait lists and this idea of a spectator. And I basically developed everything online, whether people sort of are watching and care or not. And actually yesterday, a couple of folks joined me using tuple. So I had some folks from Europe and it worked really well. So we got pretty much the feature just about done.
Very cool.
And it's like, I don't know if anybody, cares, and I think Love was here a little bit yesterday and there's some other people, but I just sort of, for me, it's sort of just habit now. It's like, is this something where, I just like having, giving people the opportunity to just watch like real development by someone who does TDD and things like that. And, you get into questions like, wow, I just had to copy 8 lines of setup code. What should we do about that? And like Daniel says, I have no idea what I just copied, but okay, I'll copy it and paste it. It's like, oh, we should probably refactor that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, didn't do that. But for those of you watching, you actually didn't miss much because most of what I was doing was scratching my head as I read documentation and sort of painstakingly migrating just basically copying my existing framework into this code and then modifying it to work with the S6 and TypeScript. So it was kind of tedious work. But as I said, I think this is sort of an interesting conversation about buy versus build as well, because everybody says if somebody else has made it, just use their stuff.
Yeah, I wish it were that clear.
Yeah.
Because like even like my ensembler tool, like what is it doing? It's really just, an event management system, right? There's a scheduled date and time for something. There's a number of people who can sign up. And, could I have cobbled it together with a couple of tools using, something like Tito or Eventbrite or something like that, plus other, maybe Zapier. But it's like, I think one of the nice things is as developers, especially for more personal tools, it's fairly different in like a corporate environment. But like as, we're sort of soloists or individual freelancers or whatever. And I think creating bespoke tools is one of the things we can leverage, right? And now, like, I don't have to think about scheduling these events and how to schedule them and making sure that people are, have GitHub accounts and are approved and all that kind of stuff and sending out like all that stuff that I did manually for a while, which I think is important to learn how to do it manually before you automate it. But then, writing the tool was, for me, I try to as much as possible make it serve two masters. One is it provides value to me when it's done, but also provides value in terms of me learning something and using that information then as part of courses or coaching or things like that.
Yeah. There's another piece to it. You said that, as sort of freelancers or people who have more control over our time than the average corporate worker, this is something that we can leverage. But I think it's more than that. I do try to, at least in all the work I put out into the world, and you don't want to see what I'm doing when I'm not on stream or on camera, but all the work I put out in the world, I do try to do it in a realistic way. Like this is how I actually approach my work. And that includes like doing this test framework. Like this is something I would do in a real world environment. There would probably be a certain amount of politicking to say, as everybody goes, well, why on earth would you do that?
Right.
And so there'd be some consensus building, and is this the right thing to do? But once and that's the advantage that we have as solo.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't saying we don't do that. It's just it's a lot easier when you don't have to get anybody else's buy-in. Yeah.
Exactly. Like you argue with yourself, your 3 or 4 personalities, and then eventually you come to a consensus. But it's a lot faster because that mostly happens in the shower.
Right.
The thing is that when people think about buy versus build, and this is sort of an endemic problem in the software industry, I found, is people think the cost of software development is the cost of building code.
Right.
And the cost of software development is maintaining code. So if you were to cobble something together with Tito or an Eventbrite and GitHub and such, you will be going back and recobbling it together every time any one of those services change.
Yes. It's right. It goes back to sort of this dependency thing that you basically, and except a lot worse than, because you now have no control over those dependencies. And so integration dependencies are terrible.
Yeah. And I hate, I'm in the middle of something and I get a note that, this thing has changed and my site's broken. And I have to drop everything to go fix it.
Yeah.
I do not want to do that.
Yeah.
Or I don't want to hear there's this security change. I've got to drop everything and install it. I absolutely will use third-party software. But generally speaking, if it's going to take me less than a day to build it myself, that maintenance cost, that ongoing maintenance cost isn't worth it.
Right.
And if it's going to take more than a week, it probably is worth it. But there's sort of a period in the middle where I'm not sure. And like with the test framework, I'll often start out with a third-party system. And then over time, as I have to go through all this maintenance hassle of keeping up to date, it'll be like, well, now I understand my needs better and I can build something myself.
Right.
And that's the other thing is when you build it yourself, it's not really, you're not comparing to the cost of somebody building what they build. It's how do I build just the subset I need for the stuff I care about,
right.
Which is a really small cost compared to doing a giant, massive framework.
Yeah.
Hey, hi, Erica. Looks like there's another vote for streaming the testing tool stuff. It's pretty much done though, unfortunately. But the source code is all up on GitHub. So if you go get the source code, which I think we've got a short link for that.
We do.
Yep, there's the source code. You can see how it's done. It's only 500 lines of code. That's the thing. The test framework is only 500 lines of code, and that includes the reporting and everything else.
That's cool.
Yeah, there's like 2,000 lines of tests, and I'm not completely proud of that code because it turns out the interactions between Java didn't have this, but Mocha introduced this idea of you'd put .skip and .only on the name of a test function. Of course, in JavaScript, you can have object properties on a function because a function is an object.
Right.
So you put .skip and it skips that test, and you put .only and it only runs that one test. But you can do that on suites as well. So the question is, how does it behave when the suite is marked .only, and then another suite inside that is marked .skip, and then another test inside that is marked .only? And so there is a ridiculous number of tests making that logic work correctly, and that's sort of the
those edge cases,
the messiness of it.
I was when I was at Guidewire Software, one of the things that I wrote was a system that automated stuff that the QA was doing in order to test certain configurations of things. And did I over-engineer it? Yeah, perhaps a bit. But it meant that now nobody had to troubleshoot, hey, I installed it and then I installed it again and the thing didn't work. And so it was less about, it was probably equal about that now they just literally pushed a button. And they had a lot more flexibility in what they could do. They could select different combinations of things. But also as if you did it and did it again, it was, assuming the software underneath didn't change, it was 100% reliable. And then reporting bugs was a lot easier because it knew which one they deployed. So it had all that information.
Nice.
And so, this was around when Kubernetes was just coming out. and wasn't really ready for, and I basically built my own little cluster manager because we were deploying these things on, like each one would take a significant amount of a machine to deploy, and so we were deploying them on multiple machines, and so that was very much a learning experience for me. But like even there, it's like I built my own little cluster manager because I knew exactly what I needed. I didn't need all the fancy stuff that Kubernetes has now. I just needed the ability to say, this goes on this machine, this goes on this machine, and separate things this way and this way. And you get, and that's right, that's the benefit you're talking about. Is like you don't have to build a general purpose thing.
Yeah.
You build specifically for your needs.
People always say, well, if you don't use a framework, you're going to build a framework yourself. No, don't build a framework.
Don't build a framework.
Just build what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then over time, as your needs grow, maybe you will end up with a framework. But that's going to be over the course of years, and each individual change. Like the build that we have now is the result of me. It's basically transferred over from my production code base. And that's the result of a day here, an hour there, over the course of 11 years. Because that's when I started that code base.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's probably, I don't know, 3-4 weeks of effort into it at this point, but never more than a couple of days at a time, maybe a week part-time work for the tester.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it occurs to me, I'm seeing in the chat a lot of interest in watching me or us scratch our heads. There is actually some more work to do on this automated build to get the incremental compiler done. That is something we can do today. I was going to do that on my own off camera. And I don't want to hijack the stream away from the OpenAI stuff we've been doing. But that is something we could do today if you're on board with it, Ted. And I don't want to hijack.
I'd be interested in that. We could certainly time box it. Say,
okay.
We'll use 1 hour for that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Hey, Sweetie.
Yeah.
So Trevok, yeah, like the worst thing that happens is like people start wanting to use it, and then you have to make a different decision of like, okay, we made it specifically for this use. Do we actually want to expand it? And it sort of depends. Is this like an internal tool, or is this something external, or is it an internal tool that they're going to say, oh, now we want to make it something that we're going to sell or turn into a product or something like that? And that's a whole different set of decisions to make, because now you're committing to taking on features that you aren't intimately familiar with because you're not
necessarily
the customer.
Yourself.
Yeah, and then you have to decide, like, then there's a cost to that, and that cost may come at your ability to change it for your own needs, and so there's a whole set of interesting thoughts there.
I've thought about open sourcing, or it is open source because it's part of this code base, which is MIT licensed, but I've thought about officializing this testing framework and also my build tool. And Fred Brooks has, in the Mythical Man Month, which of course is a classic collection of essays, he says something that really sticks with me. And he says that the cost to create something is 1x. The cost to document it is 3x. Mm-hmm. And the cost to, I think it was documented. I don't have the book right here. It's definitely in my office somewhere. And the cost to productionalize it is 3x. That is to support all the use cases people other than you need.
Right.
And so the cost to release a piece of software is 9x. Because it's 3 times 3 times the original cost.
Right.
And that has stuck with me because I think there's a lot of truth to it. Like if I were to take this little simple testing framework I've made that has some quirks that I'm just able to work around because I know it.
Right.
And really do it properly, and also make it support not only the exact use case I care about, but the people who are also using, I had it supporting CommonJS, so I had to spend a couple of days last week modifying this to use ES6 and to support TypeScript. Like those are all things I just didn't have to do before. And I'm lazy, and nobody's ever going to pay me for that. And I need to get paid because I don't have a real job. So that's why I haven't done it yet.
Right.
Yeah. So should we take a look at that, see what that looks like and how it works?
Yeah, let's take a look at that. Yeah.
All right. So I've got this. I actually have it in the Spike SWC. I was literally working on this before the stream, and then I had to go have lunch because we were gonna start. And I was like, oh, I'm so close to getting the incremental build work, but I'm gonna have to set it aside. So I put it in the Spike SWC branch, which is obviously not working. So we're just going to sort of, I think, join a work in progress here. Let me make this more visible. And this is not something I ever expected to share on stream. And so there's a lot of stuff in here that is not like, it's just get it done rather than finish it. But this is using a build library I made that's very, very straightforward. What it does is it has a task that takes a name and a function and it puts it in a map.
Mm-hmm.
So when you tell it to run a task, it's effectively just going to go through and run that, look up that name and run that function.
Right.
That's the build tool. So this is the build script that, when we're running the build, this is what it's doing. It's just saying, here's all the things. So if we say build type check, for example, it's going to come down through here. It's going to find the task, label type check, and it's just going to run this function. And that's really all there is to it. So what I've been working on right before we started the stream, I was working on the compile task. And are
there dependencies between the build things? Like if you do, I don't know what the
yes
steps
and
were.
No.
Okay.
I can say that when you run the compile task, first run this task first.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I do.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's no dependency analysis. It's just run a task, and then that task can run another task or not run another task.
Okay.
Depending on how it goes. But the philosophy is that each task only runs if it needs to. So don't run, like, return early effectively if you need to. So that's, I'll go through this, but it's a little bit messy, but that's what's going on here. So this is the old code. It used to just, when I wanted to run the compiler, I would run SWC, Speedy Web Compiler, from the command line, and it would go build the entire thing. And then if that code came back as non-zero, it would throw compile failed, and that's how the compiler worked.
Right.
Now what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, well, we've got all the compiler dependencies. Let's loop through them and ask, has that been modified? So this is the incrementalism. This is how we find what's been modified. Given one of those files, compare it to the name of the thing it creates, which should really be called compiler output file name.
So what does so I'm actually not familiar with the compilation aspects in this world. What is it actually generating?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I can show you easily, because it's all sort of in pieces right now. But if we take, for example, hello TSX, so here's the hello component that I've got set up. That's getting converted into hello.js.
Oh, okay. So this is compiling the TypeScript. It's not compiling JavaScript. Compiling TypeScript into JavaScript. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I should have said that from the beginning.
That's where my confusion was. It's like what actually is it compiling? Because I know there's also like other ways to compile JavaScript into native or whatever.
No, this is just
this is
sort of your classic build script in JavaScript, build step in JavaScript, where you're converting your TypeScript or your JSX or your TSX into regular JavaScript.
Right.
And so this is what that output looks like. And of course, it's a giant mess.
So it's looking to see, have I generated a JavaScript more recent, at least as recently as the file, or is it outdated?
Yeah, it's basically boils down to, is modified async is a little utility function I've got in the build library that says, if this parameter is newer than this parameter, turn true. And then I'm doing that simultaneously over all the files that I've got as dependencies and returning either the file name or null, and then I'm filtering out all the nulls to get the list of files that we want to compile.
Right.
And so if I log that list of files to compile and build, you can see that it's empty right now. And then if I change this file here, now you'll see
Right.
that it's got that changed file in it.
Right.
So that piece of it's working.
All right.
Yeah, so it's done, right? And then here, if it doesn't have any files to compile, we return early.
Right.
So, oh, and look, I've already been logging the files to compile because I was. Then I run this time async function, which is just making. So you see all these timestamps that are appearing on here. That's just a decorator to make that happen automatically. Then we say, okay, we're going to compile the JavaScript. So that's just one of these headlines that you see here. And we, again, simultaneously across all the files, we run speedywebcompiler.transform file. We give it the file name, and we give it all the options, which eventually will have factored out into a module that that's not in here, but it's in the config library or the config area. And that will return, doesn't write the file for us, it just gives us the source code and it gives us a source code map as strings. And then I figure out what the names of those files should be, because right now it's got the name ending in .tsx or .ts. So I say, given that source file, convert that into the appropriate generated output file name with .js on the end and with .js.map on the end for the output, and then I write them. And this is just a little utility function I wrote that says, hey, I'm going to write the file, and if the directory doesn't exist, I'm going to write the entire directory tree that leads to it.
Right.
And then again, logging what got written out.
Right.
And so there you have it. That is the output that we're getting in the generated file. Here's your hello test.js, hello test.js.map, hello.js, hello.js.map. That all corresponds to hello and hello test.tsx.
Neat.
Yeah, so that's great. It's all working perfectly, except that when the tests run, it's saying that's not a valid file. And I don't know why. So y'all that wanted to see me scratch my head, this is it. This is me scratching my head.
Right.
And this is where I left off. I got to this point. I said, I'm hungry. I don't think I'm going to be able to figure this out before the stream starts. And I checked it into the branch. So yeah, should we try to debug this and figure it out?
So what is actually, it's saying that, so tell me what the error means, because this is a little out of my ballpark.
So what's happening is the test framework, the way it works is you give it a list of file names, in this case, hello.test.js, and it requires that. It just imports it at runtime. And when it's doing that, it is JavaScript is throwing an exception, Node is throwing an exception, and the test framework is catching that and saying, hey, I wasn't able to require that. Here's the error I got from JavaScript. Good luck, goodbye. And yeah, that's it. So Suigi asks, is hello test actually valid JavaScript? I'm thinking no, it's probably not actually valid JavaScript. And so that's what we need to figure out, is what's happening here. So let's go look at that. So that is the generated code that's coming out of it. And it's complaining about unexpected token : on, I don't know, on some line. So that's going to make life a little difficult.
Well, how many colons could there be? I guess a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh my,
actually,
yes. Okay,
I don't know.
that's
Let's
quite a
find
lot.
out. I'm guessing I don't know what all this stuff is. I think this is me not configuring the compiler correctly, and it's generating a lot of output.
Yeah.
I think on the assumption that we have an old version of a JavaScript engine or something like that.
So what comes to mind for me is if we can't figure out exactly what's wrong, is there information that we're not displaying from the compiler that would help us locate where this unexpected token is?
Well, this is not the compiler saying this.
I mean, sorry, the runner.
Maybe. I think what we could try to do is write a little standalone app that required this file, and we might get a better message, because what's happening is requiring it inside of the test runner, and that may be causing some issues. But I was thinking, well, let's just scan through this and say, is there anything obviously wrong? And honestly, I look at it and no, I don't see anything obviously wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
so yeah, what Suiji's saying is exactly what I think our next step is. Let's run it. So if we say node generated compiled TypeScript front end source loadtest.js, there we go, same issue.
Oh, it says it's line 1 because it's all one line?
Oh, it's actually complaining about hello.js, it looks like.
Oh.
And
yeah, so that would, like, what it displayed here would be useful to display, but I'm not sure how common that is.
You know what might be the issue is I've been working on this and I've got a bunch of old files in there. I'm just going to clean it and tell it to run again, because we might just have an old file
just
that hasn't been compiled with the current settings. That was a good thought. Well, the good news is now everything's broken. So at least it's consistent.
So, right, yeah, at least it's not just one file. It's something more fundamental.
Let's see, is it still having the same issue? Yeah. It looks like it's the source map at the end. I think it's a compiler option. That's be my best guess. Yeah, look at this. This is the newer version of the compiler. And remember how before it gave us this nice sort of formatted output, and now it's all compressed into one line? So there's something about the way we're calling SWC that's wrong. And probably the code we saw before was the result of the old test run where I was running the command line SWC.
Right.
And this is using the new stuff.
Right.
So now what we need to do is we need to go in, and here's all of our options. We need to figure out what these options are supposed to be. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, at least if there was a way to get it to I mean, yeah, we could check that. I'm just curious, like, is there a way to get it to generate multiple lines, or could you reformat it just to see what we're...
There's definitely a way to get it to generate multiple lines, because the output from SWC used to be much cleaner.
Okay. So something's changed, or
something has changed. Like if we go back to the branch that we were on before, and we clean it and compile it, we look at these files, I think we're going to see some nice looking stuff. Yeah, look at that. It doesn't have all the garbage at the top. It's not all in one line. So this is the output we want to get. This is what we get when we run Speedy Web Compiler from the command line.
So the command line is doing something that that we've clearly not done.
Right, exactly. And the thing is I'm using the exact same config. but I may not be using it correctly. So yeah, so let's go back to the thing that's not working. And we'll clean it.
We'll clean it, yeah.
Build the compiled version. And if we look at that, yeah, back to being wrong.
Weird.
So here's what I think we can do is we can log the code. And we can tell it to not write this out. And if I come in here and I make a change, it will now try to rebuild that. And that's weird. That's correct. Like,
yeah. Are you somehow not writing the right thing or writing the file incorrectly?
yeah, that's my only thought is somehow I'm not writing the file correctly.
Because that looks like it's got...
Oh, Suiji says maybe we're overwriting it later.
But overwriting it with what?
Well, I could be doing something later on, like now this is what we've written. Okay. So I'm going to write the file. Maybe I'm overwriting it with the source map.
I was going to say, I mean, it's got JSON structure in it, so it looks like... So the file variable, is that just the name of the file that you're using?
This one here?
No, on line 187.
Yeah, that is...
Why are they both the same?
Right there.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not the bug because I'm doing it here. This is the name of the file that's getting translated.
So, okay, so it's the file name. So how does it know?
Here, I'll put that.
So it's just generating the file name, and then it's actually writing code.
Let's see. Trying to get that to show up. There it is. So there's file right there.
Okay.
That's the original file, TSX. This is the translated file.
Right, and so code has the file. What does the source map look like?
What is the source what?
So
the source map.
Can we console log the source map?
Absolutely.
Because if that's what we're seeing, then we know that that's what's going on.
Let me not write this out so I don't have to keep changing this.
Yeah, that looks like it overwrote the JS with the source map.
Yeah.
Weird.
Okay, well, let's see. Maybe the code, because I just hacked this compiler dependency name together at the last second. And none of this has tests, which I've always found it really hard to write tests around build scripts. Like, I think there's a lot of power in creating custom build scripts. You were sort of talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
There's so much power in creating a custom build script and developer automation and QA automation. But I've always found it hard to write tests around it. So part of what I do want to do if I ever open source this is I'm going to make it all use nullables, right?
Right.
And properly test it, which is one of the reasons why I haven't done that yet.
Yep.
So source map Well, there's the bug right there.
Well, that doesn't look right.
No, it doesn't. So compiler dependency name. Oh, look at that.
Oh.
I never finished adding the extension. I put it here. Don't code on an empty stomach, folks. That's the lesson here.
Yeah.
The extension and the extension. I think what this really proves is that I cannot be trusted to code without tests.
Can anyone? I mean,
yeah. Well, I wasn't going to go that far, but no.
Well, I know I can. Like,
yeah. I mean, one thing that I've learned from doing TDD is that I make mistakes all the time. And TDD isn't about not making mistakes. It's just about catching them right away.
Right. If you catch them right away, then yeah.
I think this is actually a perfect example of how TDD saves you time.
Yeah.
Because if I had tests around this, I would have spent, probably a couple minutes writing tests for this case. And then I would have found the bug and moved on.
Right.
As it is, I didn't write the test. I saved a ton of time not writing tests.
Yes.
Like 2 minutes not writing this test. And then, I don't know, an hour of us talking about it and figuring it out.
Right.
Plus the time I spent beforehand.
Right. And the cost to our viewers, just multiply that out.
Yeah. Well, they asked for it.
I know.
You asked for this. So I think that actually should work. That should work it. Yeah, Jay says we make mistakes all the time, and most of the time we don't even know them. And
if you're not doing TDD, you're making mistakes, and you won't find out about it until later.
And people say, well, it doesn't have to be TDD; you just need tests. But it turns out that the discipline required to do really good tests, I do not think that it is possible to have really good tests without doing TDD.
I think it's so much harder to write the tests after. I mean, not just from, the code wasn't set up to be tested, just from a purely human, I'm done. Why do I need to write tests? Like this sense of you are done because the code is done, which is completely untrue. But that's how it feels. And a lot of the mistakes are silly. Yeah.
Here's the magic moment. We should be able to run the full build here, have it incrementally compile, and run the tests and work. And it was about half a second before. It still isn't working. Let me clean it.
I was going to say, let's... well, that's different.
Oh, look at this. Hello test.js.
See, you didn't write a test, and then you tried to fix it, and you still didn't write a test, and it's still broken.
It's so true. It's so true.
Actually, in the back of my head, I was going to say something, and then I got distracted. And so even pairing doesn't help. Pairing does not make up for lack of tests. And it's really interesting because, like, the saying that, what is it? Many eyes make bugs shallow, and that's completely untrue in my experience. Like, yes, it surfaces some, but like,
what I found pairing is really good for is for design and self-discipline.
Yeah.
Like when I'm pairing, I'm more likely to be embarrassed and say, oh, well, we should probably factor that out.
Right.
And I will sort of be embarrassed on my own behalf. And then I'll say, but I don't feel like doing it right now. Right. And I'll give myself a pass.
Yeah.
And saying that out loud, not always, but most of the time, the other person will say, yeah, and we really should factor that out. And I might even be like, do we really need to?
Right.
Like, yeah, we really need to. And also, if you're tired, the other person usually is tired in a different way. And it's...
And even if the other person doesn't say anything, I feel because just the mere social aspect says, I need to be my better self when I'm pairing or an ensemble. And so for me, that's how that works.
So Astrid is here with a zinger, which is, okay, does that mean we're actually going to write the test now?
We should. I mean, it's a function.
The answer is probably not. I mean, unless you want this stream to be about how to build an automated build.
I mean, so one thing you could do, couldn't you just take that function? I mean, does it rely on anything else? Is it self-contained?
The compiler dependency name function,
Yeah.
that's totally self-contained.
So
it's actually an inner function right now.
Yeah, so you could just test that, right? Make sure that works. And if nothing else, you could pull it out into a separate file and test it.
I could. I totally don't want to. Like properly, I do want to do proper build, test the build, but really properly testing this is going to be about making all of the third-party things nullable, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so having one test file that doesn't actually test anything meaningful, I don't actually think that would improve the quality of the code.
What I did want to say though is sometimes I'll do that. Like, okay, this code is not amenable to easy testing, but there's this method that I want to test. Let me pull it out and literally copy and paste it and put it into my test class. It's sort of the inverse of a SAF squeeze kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe there's another.
Oh yeah, just to say, just to say, like, the point where you can test it.
Yeah, it's like
it's right, and then you can even put it back.
And then I basically, if I change anything, then I'll just put it back.
Yeah. So I think it's time for the moment of truth. I should be able to change hello TSX and have it compile. So right now you can see it's compiling all those different files.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing it a lot faster now. Before, SWC was taking 0.08 seconds, and now it's taking 0.01 seconds. And the reason is it was probably spending 0.07 seconds running spinning up JavaScript. Because SWC is a command line tool that's written in Rust, but it's got a JavaScript front end.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not exactly sure why I'm faster there. Maybe it's not doing as much analysis. Maybe it's not analyzing the node modules. I don't know. But I make a change. There we go. It still compiled everything. And it should have only compiled one thing. Why did it compile everything? So he just says you need to put the extension argument at line 152. Oh.
See, here's where like a statically typed language with not optional parameters would have forced you to put that in.
It's true. It's true. And I'm not I don't love TypeScript, but that it would have caught that. It would have totally. Yeah. And the reason I don't love TypeScript is not because I don't love types. Like, I think types are really important. It's because we talked about this last time. It's because it's slow. Yeah. And it's redundant with runtime type checking and tests.
Right.
But neither one of those things did I have here.
Right. Yeah, the type checker would have caught it, or tests would have caught it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's working now. Look, we're only compiling one thing, and we're only running the two tests. Mm-hmm. And we've saved 0.08 seconds. Probably about it's varying. Probably about 1/10 of a second.
Yeah, yeah.
But as we continue to add more code,
right,
that will continue to go up.
Yeah.
I'm actually a little surprised the cost for testing is so high here, because maybe it's because there's a lot of. I think it's just because this test is fairly expensive. Here's what it is. It's loading up this entire JS DOM thing.
Mm.
That's probably where the cost of the test is coming from. But instead of this multiplying out as we add more and more things, it should stay nice and small at about 1/3 to 1/4 of a second.
Right.
And we're under budget. We've got 0.6 of a second to spare, so we're good to go.
All right.
So I'd like to do a few more things in here.
Yeah.
So we've got to, make it work, make it right, make it fast. I guess we're doing that backwards, but what I'd like to do is now clean this up. So I know I've been sort of both driving and navigating here. How would you like to approach this?
I mean, it seems like this configuration stuff is I assume it's pretty static. Like once you're not going to change this much.
Yeah. In fact, we've got all this configuration here, which is where I normally keep it. So I think moving that out is the first step.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do that, or do you want to do it?
Why don't you do it? I'm not sure how, unless you're just going to cut and paste. Yeah, okay.
Sort of cut and paste.
Sort of cut and paste.
There. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to rename this to be wc.config.js. Oops.
So is that actually? Yeah, I was going to say it wasn't valid JavaScript. Okay. So when you export default, does it get a name, or does that not really matter?
What's happening there is, if we go back to our build, here we're importing build, we're importing dependency analysis. That's the default.
Oh, okay.
Here, where we're importing path to file, that's
Right.
a named
Right.
export.
Okay.
And then here, this is a whole bunch of different named exports.
Right. So it takes the name of the file?
This is the name of the file, and this is the name of the function that's being exported.
Right. So for the config, what does that get? Yeah. So that you just import. Yeah.
So we'll say just do that, and then.
So it takes whatever's there and then assigns it the name that you give it. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now we should be able to come down to our compiler here, and they should be able to say,
using that imported thing, right?
And this is where, again, it would be nice to have tests, because now I've got to go in and I've got to manually make a change and see that it still worked, and it looks like it did.
So, Mr. Shadow, we're working on basically doing some refactoring and some other cleanup of James's build and mostly test tool that he wrote and talked about on his Mastodon.
I think I'd like to commit and say that we've gotten. We should have done that before we started refactoring. That we've got the SWC incremental build working.
Right.
I'm going to just amend the previous commit, which is sort of set aside prior to things working. So incremental build files TypeScript. And let's go ahead and put this on the dev branch. And now we can get rid of the. Okay. So the other thing that I think would be interesting to do. Oh, you know what else we're missing here? The compiler can't fail right now.
Can't, meaning?
Like, I don't know what happens if it fails to compile.
Oh.
That was not something I got figured out. Hey, Hank Pink. Yeah, this stream is a combination of JavaScript and Java. We're using JavaScript on the front end and Java on the back end. And the build actually is written in JavaScript as well. The build is only currently working on the front end, but I have hopes and dreams of having this kind of fast incremental compilation of the Java code as well. Whether or not that will come true, we'll see. So I think what we need to do next is to make something fail. So shouldn't compile. Or shouldn't really either. It says it compiled.
So that's interesting. Because it generated the output. Did it generate the output?
That's the question. Like what actually came out of this?
Right. So if the lint failed, does it actually still compile?
Oh no, I turned off the linting. I told it
you
to
turned
only
off the linting. Okay.
Yeah, I just said do the compile. By default,
okay.
it does linting and everything else, but I just told it to do the compile task.
So hey, and look, I put a semicolon at the end. Let's put semicolons at the end of everything.
All right. Well, what happens if we just... There's got to be a way to make this build break.
There you go.
It looks like SWC is throwing an exception when it fails. Because the build failure happens when a task throws an exception.
Is this not the behavior you want, though? Because that looks useful.
No, I'd like it to try to compile everything and then print out a nice set of error messages.
Oh, okay.
For each one. Should we take our break? And
I was going to say, let's take a break.
Okay, so yeah, we wanted to get this showing us our compiler error. So the compiling is happening here. And the way this is working is we're converting all the files into a set of promises. And then we're waiting for all those promises to complete.
Right.
We should be able to just say try catch on the transform file, and then see those errors come out.
Code is not defined. Is that the variable code?
That's, I think what's happening is we're coming. Yeah.
Okay.
What it is this is, I turned off the linter, so this is
all bets are off.
This is something that would have linted and failed. Yeah, there we go. So I think that's... I'm not sure if that's working or not.
How many files are getting compiled?
None. Well, one.
I mean,
just this one.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just, this compile field that's coming out. I'm not sure what's causing that. Oh, I see what's happening. This is returning true. This is returning undefined. We're looking for true for every response to be true, and it's not. So it's saying that it failed, and that's why it's throwing a compile failed. So what's happening here is the result we return from here ends up in here as an array. And then here we're saying, look at every single one of them and see if the predicate matches. And if it's not, then we're setting this variable. If it's not, then we set this variable to true. So this is effectively doing the return false. And that's why we're getting the compile failed error message coming back out. Is what we want.
Okay.
So I think all we have to do now is turn this into a nice error message.
So what does the error message get returned as? Is that, so when transform file fails, what is it actually returning?
It's throwing this error message here.
Oh, it throws the error message. Okay, and that's where that has the information. Got it.
Yeah. So if we should see this error come out on the command line.
Yep.
Yeah. So now it's just a question of saying, well, how do we want this to read? I think file failed, and then the error message.
I can see what that puts out. I forgot the dollar.
Dollar sign on there.
Yep.
Okay. Looks like we don't actually need this because it's already part of the error message here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what we can just do is write the error message,
yeah,
and return false.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. I've been thinking a lot, because I always am, about Booleans and how little information they carry when you do like a return false or return true. It's like, what does false mean here? What is the,
Right.
And constantly I run into this, and I'm like, boy, like a named enum of some sort would really help in understanding, like, if this, anyway, it always comes to me, because, like, okay, what does return false mean here? And then you're translating it and looking through for trues, and it's like, what does that mean?
I think that's a really good point. And we could do an enum, except JavaScript doesn't really have enums, which makes it a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
But we could say, for example,
I mean, I guess you could just create a constant, right?
A compile result.
Yes, 3 is the most primitive thing I can obsess about. So I'm always obsessing.
Success is success, and fail.
Comma?
Okay. Put a comma in the right spot, although actually it wouldn't matter. And this can be the compile results. And then here we can return compile result dot fail. Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree. That instantly makes things much more readable. And then here we're going to say it's failed if some result is equal to compile result fail.
Nice.
Let's get 2 compiler errors and see if that works properly.
That was what I was asking about. How many files is it actually compiling? Because we've only seen the situation of one.
It's bigger. So there's our compiler. It's going through.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they didn't have this large gap, because it sort of looks like these two go together.
Right.
Caused by syntax error. I wonder if we could only display, like, there may be something we can do to show less of the error message.
The context. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because really this part here is all we need. But it's definitely working with the two errors.
Yep.
It's just
the layout could be improved, but it has the right information, so that's good.
What do you want to do next? Do you want to improve the layout or do something else?
What's something else we could do?
Well, it doesn't work currently if it succeeds.
It doesn't work if it succeeds.
Right, because
that seems kind of important.
Yeah, let's make it succeed.
Yeah. So Astrid says, should we commit?
Yeah, I think we should. Let's get this working better. Let's get it to work if it succeeds first.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's the success. The code is not defined. And that is because this catch that try should really surround thing. And I could have sworn we fixed that. Okay. Yeah, let's commit it. What did we do here?
I don't remember. Other than replacing true and false, I don't remember what else we did. Well, we're capturing the error on the compile. That was the feature we did.
Builds, GC, our build displays file errors.
Depending on your definition of properly.
Yeah, it's not a great message. I agree.
They're correct. They may not be proper because they don't know what we want, but they're certainly correct.
The thing is it was displaying it before rather than crashing. Catches and displays.
Right.
Because before it was catching all of them, and it would have just chosen one randomly, I think whichever one happened first, and displayed that one.
Right.
But now it's displaying all of them.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that we need to do here before this is really properly done, I mean, to the standard that it's at right now, which is not very high, is to factor out this code into, I've got these runners which run all the various tools.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than having it all in the build,
create a compile runner.
But before we do that, I think I'd like to fiddle with the error messages a little bit and maybe get this caused by syntax error to go away.
That comes from, so is there other stuff in the error message, in the error that we can look at, or is it just going to be manually trimming that?
Well, I don't want to manually trim it because then we're sort of subject to the whims of
exactly.
No, what I was thinking was that we would.
Is there a configuration for that?
That's what I was going to look up.
Okay. I should have just said, "What are you thinking about?"
So, documentation core. So one of the things I really liked about this SWC, and this is not super common in the JavaScript world, is rather than just providing a command line tool for you to run, they provide a command line tool and a core interface. And that's something that Vite or Vite did well as well. And one of the reasons I really liked it, other than the speed, is that they were designed for you to use. So it specifically says this is for use by build tool authors.
Mm-hmm.
The downside is the documentation is very, it's definitely coming from the school of thought. If I've got a type, I've given you everything that you need to know. It's not entirely true.
I think it's it feels like one of those things that we just haven't gotten to this yet, and this is auto-generated from the code.
Yeah, I don't think it's auto-generated, but it's terse for sure.
Yeah.
So there's no documentation about the error messages, or even that it throws an error message.
Would that not be as a configuration only for the command line?
The configuration is that big object that we send in with all the different parameters in it.
Right. So is there, I guess maybe there's no options there.
Oh, there might be.
Like how much to display for errors.
Oh.
But it's not really telling us.
I mean, the typical way in JavaScript is that if you're that you might make the error object have different properties on it for the different things that you could display. So that's what I was kind of assuming would be the case.
Okay.
Rather than it being configurable in the config file. But yeah, I'm not seeing anything here. Yeah.
Could always do a documentation search for error messages.
Yeah. Why don't you?
So where's my cursor? There it is. So I could do. So
Well, that looks
error
promising.
reporting. So
No, this is just the
oh,
standard Rust.
this is Rust's standard thing.
This is the plugin cheat sheet.
So what does it say? Tests.
I think this is for people who are writing air plugins.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything.
There's one more thing I would like to try. And I don't want to waste too much time on this because I don't know that it's a good use of our time. And it's pretty good as is. But what I'll typically do is look at the code.
Yep.
Except that it's not JavaScript. So
would the bindings be JavaScript or no?
I don't know.
I don't know how this is written. Yeah, this looks like Rust code.
Let me. Okay, I think searching through this is going to be a fool's errand.
Yeah.
Let me try one more thing.
So Suiji mentions the error object. Is there a way to just dump the error? Is that what you're going to do? Okay.
That was just what I was going to do. And we'll need to make it cause an error. So there's our code. And there's I don't know what this is. So we can do, usually console log does this, but I'm going to try doing a util.inspect on the error.
What does that do?
Nothing, because I haven't imported it. Util is just a built-in node function to tell you what's inside of an object.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, same thing. I just find it really weird the way it's outputting.
That's it? That can't be right.
So here's a fun fact about JavaScript. Exceptions can be anything. You can throw a string, you can throw a number, or you can throw an error object.
Well, of course, because there's no types. So of course you should be able to do that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't want to throw undefined as an exception?
That's just
null.
mean. That's just mean.
But
it clearly has message on it. So why is this JSON stringify not showing that?
I don't know that it does have message. I think it might be. I don't know what it's throwing here, and that's what I'm going to ask it.
Okay.
It should be throwing an object, yeah. And the name of an object is that. It is an error.
Okay.
We should be able to say, what are all the keys that you have on that object? That is so bizarre.
yeah, it's like we're doing an error.message, so clearly it has message.
So it must be doing the message as a getter.
Okay.
Okay. I think the long story short is
This
there
is
we
good
go.
enough for now.
Yeah. And what we could do is separate our error messages like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we have multiple error messages,
Right.
that's pretty readable, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
Is that good enough?
I think that's good enough. Don't forget to delete the errors.
What? No, that's good code. One more thing, one more little bit of obsession before I call it good. No. Yeah, I'm going to check that in. And I think I'm just going to...
With your broken code?
Oh, right. See, now this is why we pair. We're all good there. Let me run the linter as well. Okay. So what did we do? We just refined compiler.
Compile error display.
Okay. So there's, I think, a little more we could do here if you think it's a good use of our time, which is to take this code and move it into
Into a separate runner.
into a separate runner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do that, and then that will be our last task.
Sounds good. Okay. So I'm going to factor that out, and I'm going to call that run async. That's what I call all of these. Oh, and I think we're going to want to pull the compiler dependency name. No, so there's sort of this question of who's responsible for what, and I think I'm just going to leave this here for now because I just don't want to spend too much time on this today. This code is all sort of hacked together, and I think there's lots of opportunities to improve it. So there's this question of, well, how do we do dependencies and figure out file names and everything else? But I think I'll just leave it like it is. Okay, so we should be able to make a runner for SWC. And then this can be moved.
Oh, it supports move.
It does now. Yeah, I didn't even try it until I saw you doing it with Java. I was like, I wonder if it's smart enough to do that in JavaScript these days. And the answer is...
what I found is just because it says it does it.
It has done it successfully for me before.
All right, good. Because in the past I've asked it to do stuff and it's like, oh, I'll partially do it. And I don't blame it too much because it is JavaScript. Which is just hard to, yeah.
It's because I think of the TypeScript stuff. It's got really good type analysis, and also the importing for some reason makes it a lot happier than the old require approach did. And I think that's because this is statically analyzable, whereas the require statements were not.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Okay, it's complaining about
build.
Right.
Oh, because it's calling back into to do the write. So you'd have to move the write out into a separate thing.
And this is, again, I wasn't having my helpers do any file writing. Like they were just reading and returning results. I think I kind of want to revert this and call it good for today, and then sort of spend some time thinking about it off camera.
Yeah.
Because I just don't feel like this is going to be super interesting to continue down this road.
Yeah.
So I'll set here. Integrate it. Incremental compilation. Let me do that here. Code. There we go. Well, you said you wanted to put about an hour on it, and that's what we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah.
One of the things I need to fix one of these days is the lower third or chiron that we have at the bottom. The tooling behind it is a little bit flaky. I'm not sure. I mean, naturally, I'm going to blame Trello because what happens is they do a webhook, and I wonder if they're not sending it or if I'm just missing the webhook, and then it tries to resend it, and I wonder if that's what. Because when I change order of things, there's a slight delay in changing it.
So, I really love the tooling you have around that, though. That's very cool. The way you can do the have it all on Trello and make it automatically update.
Sweetie, is the backend still running on Heroku? That's a good question. If it is, I'm paying for it, so it's not the startup sleep delay. At least I don't think it is. But it might be. But I've been changing it a lot, so it's a half hour before Heroku puts stuff to sleep, so it certainly has not been a half hour. I suspect I'm missing a webhook call, and then I move things around to jiggle it, and then it does another webhook call, and then I finally get it. But I have to. That's one of those. Again, we talk about bespoke tools. Like that's a tool I developed specifically for the stream, specifically for how I wanted to do it. And now I'm realizing there's stuff I want to change, and we'll have to go back into that code and see now what the heck was I doing.
But it had tests, right?
I think it had tests, at least some tests. There's some front end stuff that was just like, this is just displaying things. So
I'll admit, when I'm creating, especially the tools that are not like a normal part of my everyday, they're just sort of one-off tools. I will often get lazy and not test it because typically they're glue code and that's harder to test.
And this is
the nullable stuff.
Yeah, and this was mostly glue code of receiving a webhook, and then so there's a backend that receives the webhook, and then there's a WebSocket connection to the browser, which is what gets basically a little browser window gets displayed at the bottom, and so that's hooked up with through a WebSocket. And so I'm not sure if the WebSocket has some flakiness or whether it's a webhook that is flakiness, and it's really just hard to test that. So I probably those aspects I'm sure I don't have any tests on.
Suiji says exactly what I was thinking, which is that I will sort of do it as, this is just a one-off, and it almost never is just a one-off, and then I do regret it.
I think what's worse is then, or possibly worse, is going back to a project you haven't looked at in literally 2 years. Like this thing, I probably have not touched the code in 2 years. I probably haven't even touched the deployment in 2 years. Now if I go back to it, it's like, what the heck was this supposed to do? We'll see. I'll probably do a future stream on improving that.
Yeah, that sounds like
I definitely have tests. So if you notice, there's the stream countdown that I have a whole bunch of tests for, and those are front end tests, and those were fun.
Yeah, it's these little tools that you think you're never going to come back to that they do live the longest. You see them forever. So I think the build is done now. So I think we can go back to the OpenAI client.
Yeah, let's do that.
Do you want me to kick us off, or do you want to sort of bring people back up to speed?
Let's open up the files and see where we are, because I actually don't remember.
Because I've been editing video all week, I do have a pretty good idea, so I can just sort of bring us back.
Yeah, bring us back.
That's right. So what we were working on was, OpenAiClient.
Right.
And specifically, we were talking to OpenAI's backend, and we had the ability to send a prompt,
Right.
get the test up. There's probably an easier way to pull up the test, but this is what I know. And let's put those over there. So we have the ability to send the prompt to OpenAI,
Right.
and that's done. We finished that.
Right.
But what we haven't done is done anything with the response back.
Right. Right.
So that's what we need to do next, is finish the OpenAI client by parsing the response and then exposing it to the caller, the OpenAI client caller. And once we do that, we need to do a little manual test of some sort, where we actually programmatically send a prompt to OpenAI with your actual key and see that it works.
Right. And see if I can not.
And then we get the fun and excitement of trying to not show the key on stream.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if we're really lucky, I'll display your password on stream again.
We won't do that. Right. So I remember the post, because unlike when we've done post stuff before, here the post is actually returning the information, which our current client does not even have.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to need to do is not just do OpenAiClient. We actually need to modify HTTPClient
Right.
to return the results of the post.
Right.
Should we start with that then?
Yeah, let's start with that.
Okay. So that should be inside of HTTPClient test. That's the wrong one. And we've got null get throws not found exception, null get. Oh, right. Because I was like, why is it all this null stuff? But we don't actually have integration tests on this. It's only the null stuff.
Right.
So
those are all the null gets.
Returns. So I think it's, and then somewhere down here we have got request or tracked. Where's the post?
I think if we go to the last test, that's where we're doing a post, and then we're using the tracker to track it, because right now post doesn't return anything, so this was the only way to do anything.
But there's also the get in here. That's weird.
Yeah, I think this must have been just copied from when we moved it over. So
yeah.
We didn't have an explicit. Basically, we were testing just. Maybe we didn't have a test for the post, and we were only using the tracker.
I don't remember now, but I think what we did was we started out creating a test for post, and when we added the tracker, we renamed the test request or tracked.
Right.
Oh, no, this is request or tracked for both get and post. Actually, get and post requests are tracked.
Right.
As we see, we've got a track here and we've got a track here.
Right.
And we've got the headers, and there's the headers.
Right.
So I think we kind of just need to repeat all of these tests for posts.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to start us off? I've been driving for quite a bit.
Yeah. So basically, I'm going to say, so we've been saying null and nulled. So is this a nulled post or a null post?
It's a nulled.
Okay.
So I've gotten some criticism, some feedback saying that calling this a null object is confusing.
Yeah.
Because that word means a lot of things.
Yeah.
So because the name's already out there and I don't want to rebrand because that causes a lot of confusion, I've decided to call them nulled versus null.
Okay.
Is that a good solution? It's what I got.
All right. I just want to make sure, because I saw that I think there was one test that starts with, these two start with null.
Oh.
So should we fix?
Okay, that's a mistake.
Okay.
And look, there is a nulled post in there.
Yeah, that's what I'm typing.
Oh. Okay.
That's why it's there. Hey, look, we're done.
Oh yeah, good.
So we want to say So this is the unconfigured one. So I want to basically repeat. So
Yeah, I think just mirror the ones we've already got.
yeah. And this always gets me about test naming is there's the null get, and then there's sort of what happens, and then there's sort of why.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if null post for unconfigured endpoint throws not found exception. I wonder.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Yeah,
I agree.
one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say unconfigured, and because that just bugs me. Okay.
But before you start programming that, if we're going to do that, then I want to rename.
That's what I was going to do. And then, oops. So this is, okay, sorry. This is an idea configuration thing. One thing I like is for the moving forward by word to recognize the camel humps.
Oh yeah, me too. Does that not do that by default?
Yeah, by default. I don't know, and I don't know why that is. Like, come on, it's Java. So smart keys. Yeah, I don't know why this isn't set up as a default. That makes no sense to me. Like, use camel humps. Come on, they're words. All right. Rant over. Okay. So, all right, great.
Before you program this, I have something I want to do real quick.
Okay.
Which is that this
okay.
needs to go
here.
And actually, if we're going to do that, we can look at the remaining ones sort of
as we go. Yep. So we're going to do, actually just going to copy that. That one will be interesting. I think the rest is going to be the same. So is this going to be ExampleDto? This is going to be post. And what does it take? It takes headers. Is it okay if we pass in an empty list, empty map here?
I would actually do it this way.
Yeah, yeah.
Make that constant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then an empty map.
Yeah. So the way I do that is I basically do the empty map, and
then factor it out.
Yeah. Whoops. Hold on. Sorry, I just moved a window.
All right, Astrid. Thanks for joining us.
All right. See you, Astrid. Oh, what is going on? Somebody's eating my keystrokes. All right, let's do this. Somebody's eating my Command Option C. I'm not sure who it is. Oh, I know who it is. It's my rectangle. All right, I'll have to fix that.
Your rectangle?
Rectangle tool is a tool I use to move things around in move windows around on the Mac in nice ways, and it ignores IntelliJ. But I don't have it set to ignore tuple. So tuple's like,
of course,
let's center your window. It's like, no.
Yeah.
And I think this is okay. Because this is going to be the body. One thing we're not specifying, which I guess I guess let's think about that. Well, here we're just saying that it's going to throw an exception. So right now that's fine. I think that's okay.
But that's definitely, so right now, can I look at something?
Yeah.
Right now that's the body class. But up here, it's the return, the response type. Yeah. Right. So we are going to need an additional response.
We're going to need it. Yes, Luigi, that's probably it if you're using a tool that normally ignores IntelliJ but doesn't ignore tuple. So, yeah. So other than that, we think this is okay.
Yeah. What happens when you run that?
Let's see. Let me just set the.
I got to say, now that we're back in the land of tests as opposed to my wonky build, I feel much more comfortable. Like I was kind of stressed working on that build.
Yeah.
Like now part of that was just like, it's something I had known and is sort of this hack together thing I'd created. I wasn't prepared to show it on stream. So you didn't really understand it because I So that was part of the stress, but
Yeah.
just not being able to talk about, well, what are we doing right now? What are we testing and what's working and what's not? This is much more relaxing.
Yeah. I always say that about TDD is it's so much less stress, so much less anxiety. And I think it's also, especially in a pairing or ensemble environment, it's so much more clear what's actually going on.
It gives you a lot of structure.
Yeah.
Like it really helps focus what's happening right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, that didn't throw anything, which is as we expected. So let's go here.
So how do we implement that for the get?
Let's see. So for the
it wouldn't have been implemented on the get. It would have been implemented on the REST template wrapper. On
right.
get for entity.
Right. So here it did get for entity. So I could look at that. And it's actually the implementations.
Yeah, the stubbed one.
Step one.
And we're saying next response.
So, right. So here, basically next response. Yeah, so this is all the stuff that's built into get that we don't have built into post.
But you know what? We can use that same next response. Like, I don't think we need to distinguish between get and post in terms of the configured responses. We can just say...
Yes. So what's the simplest thing we can do to make this?
Actually, scroll down. I know exactly what we can do.
All right. Go ahead and scroll.
Where's my mouse? There it is. I think all we need to do here is say... And Control R, is that going to run our test?
Yes. Well,
it worked. No, that works successfully. It's just we have another test that failed.
We have another test that failed because it was not expecting an exception because we didn't configure our client for that endpoint, for a post endpoint. Yep.
What did I do wrong here?
What is?
Oh,
oh, okay. Yep.
what's the reformat keybind?
Command Option L.
Command Option L.
Yeah. Did you change stuff to 2 spaces? Because I just noticed
we did.
Changed. Okay. So just
we did. I was wondering why it wasn't showing up.
Because we didn't. So what we could do. I don't know.
Because this is going to make our diff all weird, right?
Yeah. Well, it'll ignore the. Well, depends on what you're using for the diff. You can have it ignore the white space, but I was thinking we could have do you want to stash, reformat everything, and then push forward?
Yeah, let me do that.
Yeah. Because we can just do a right click on the source directory and have it reformat everything. All right, so let's go here. We basically just do right click, reformat code. Sure, optimize while you're at it.
And is the test under the source?
Yeah,
directory?
test is under source, so everything under there. Yeah, so now we can do commit. Okay. I'll let you do that. Commit reformat.
So we should have seen everything get reformatted, which we did. Good. Good. And we should be able to do a pop. And I was a little worried about that. It's unhappy.
This is one advantage to using IntelliJ to do the Git stuff, is it'll bring you into merge mode.
Yeah. Anything?
That looks good.
So reset that and
All right.
let me there's stuff in there that we don't want. Okay.
Okay.
Where does that leave us?
So let's close the terminal. So let's see. Let's run the. This says there's an error. What's going on? Oh, it just didn't import it. That's fine. Okay. And this code, I think. Oh, right. We didn't fix this side.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, if you have a. I think that was the start of it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
We just want the stash version everywhere.
Okay.
And then reformat. Why is it complaining about the stubbed response entity?
There might be something higher up. Yeah. So F2 brings you to the first error. So if we do F2, it's saying there's no. Oh, because it's not implementing getBody? Did getBody get removed? I think getBody got dropped, that's why.
Let me undo.
Yeah, there it is. And then I think there's going to be an unbalanced closing brace after the getBody. Yeah. Oh,
yep. No, you're right.
Right there, yep. So now... that's weird. Why is this?
So Mike Hill, GPA Hill on Mastodon, was recently talking about how he never, ever manually merges. And I was like, well, that's super extreme when I saw him saying that, but I'm coming around to his way of thinking now.
So let's see. So history.
You can tell it to ignore white space, right?
Yeah. And we can basically ask it to go to the first.
Did we?
So this is as of, so somehow during, so this must have been, actually, I'm really confused what this is all about.
Can I just look at the code real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got our HTTP client, we've got our REST template wrapper, we've got our real REST template, and we've got our embedded stub. And it's complaining that stubbed response entity does not exist. Oh, okay. So this is actually, this is what we were working on.
Oh, is this because we did the, yeah, so weren't we working on next response? Is that what we added in the post? So that's gone.
I don't know. Can you just revert this entire file?
I think so.
Actually, I can do that.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and revert this totally to before the stash, because we didn't really have much.
No, we didn't. I'm going to keep the test because that we changed.
Yeah, yeah.
And those are fine. So there we go. That should all be working now. And the test should still work, or should be failing in the same way.
Right, should be failing in the same way.
Okay, and so we expected the null post to raise a throwable.
Right, because then we were going to, in our exchange, we were going to say next response.
And that should have been just next response. I don't know what happened with that merge. That was really super weird. Moral of the story is reformat between commits.
All right.
And there we go. It's working.
Should we commit?
Should we? What have we done? It's not really done yet.
Well, we have the test passing. I mean, I'm fine with writing more tests, but
I guess technically, yeah. Okay, let's commit. So we have JsonHttpClient.post requires configured
response. Yep.
But doesn't use them yet. Okay.
All right. Do we want to take a break?
Yeah, I think it's time for a second break. And when we come back, we'll just continue on. Then we'll do the null post return single configured instance forever.
Right. All right.
And for those of you wondering what this is all about, I think we'll explain it when we come back.
Yep. All right. Stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. And we're back. Okay. So to catch all you up on what we're doing is, so our post method, previously we actually, our nullable here for the HTTP client, we took this from code that we had worked on for the yacht game. But there, the post never returned anything. It was basically an outgoing only message. So we never had any support for basically not just returning that, but also making it testable.
And let's actually take even a step further back.
Yeah.
Like, why do we need it to return something?
Right.
Because when we send something to OpenAI, it sends us response back.
Right.
And we want to test that without actually talking to OpenAI.
Exactly. Right.
So we need to be able to configure the nulled HTTP client to say, when you receive a post to this endpoint, send this response back.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt, Ted. I just want to provide a little extra context.
And so what we're doing is basically step-by-step writing tests for basically the infrastructure to provide that functionality. So our next step is if we do configure our nullable, then we want it to basically return that configured value.
That's right. So, and these things can be configured in two ways. They can be configured with a single value, in which case every time you call that endpoint, you get the same result back. Or they can be configured with multiple values, in which case each time you call the endpoint, you get the next result back. And then when you get to the end of the list, it throws an exception saying, I don't know what, you didn't configure that.
Right.
And this is valuable because sometimes you're talking to something where you're going to have a back and forth. And
especially the chat, right? We want it's going to be a back and forth conversation, so we'd like to have it look like that, yeah.
And sometimes you don't really care what comes back; you just want it to give you a reasonable result that you can ignore. Right. So it's useful to have both settings. And this is something I've sort of learned just over time using nullables. That this is kind of a very typical way to want to do configured responses: is having infinite responses and different responses.
Yeah. So one thing I just realized is that this name ExampleDto is now confusing because there is the return of a get, and the post will be the same thing, but there's also what are we sending out? And so you notice that before in our here, this ExampleDto is actually not the return; it's actually the outgoing body.
Let's duplicate our example DTO.
Yeah.
Or let's rename our example DTO to be our example
This is return
example return DTO, or just
response.
example response DTO.
Yep.
Just example response, I think, is fine. I don't love the DTO.
I tend to, so my naming conventions is I'll use DTO if I have nothing better. But if we're already saying it's a response, then we know if it's a request, a response, if it's a form, then those basically indicate to me that they're already DTOs.
Yeah.
In fact, I have, I did an it's actually for some reason, I was wondering, I do some very minimal tracking on my website. I have an article about some of the naming stuff, and I'm like, why is this so popular? And then I looked at Google. It's basically coming up in Google searches, people looking for just DTO and naming. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, that's good, because I like the way you think about naming. So I'd love people to do that more.
So this will become configured example response. Yep. That all looks good.
Okay. And then can we make that a record?
Can we make that a record?
Because I think we did this before you had the version of Java that supported records. Or should we come back to that later?
There's nothing. So the problem is that this constructor provides a default value. And we'd have we can convert it to a factory method. The setter is actually probably what's preventing it. This might also be preventing it, since we don't do set. Yeah, we could actually say delete that. I still think it's not going to let us create. Let me just do an experiment. Let me comment this out and see if it now allows us. That's interesting.
You know what? I don't feel like this is.
Let's but we'll leave the set deleted, because that wasn't.
But let's make an example body as well.
Yeah. So now we can basically copy this.
Well,
sorry, actually,
it doesn't. I think that one could be a record, because it doesn't need to have anything.
I was just about to say, let me just type a record. So we're saying this is going to be public record example body. And what does it have? It has body. Is it an object?
I don't think we care what the body is.
Yeah. So we'll put string. Oops. For now.
Oh, we might need this to be a class as well, because again, we're going to want it to have some value, or really it doesn't need to have anything. Can we make an empty record? Or is that just illegal?
That's a good question. Let's see. Apparently that's okay. I mean, it's basically like saying a new class that has no constructor, that has no fields. Sure, you could do that. It's just basically a typed object.
I'm not sure if this is going to work. I think it depends on how we use the example body.
That's why I was wondering. It's like, do we know enough to create this? So
yeah. Well, let's go back up and find all the cases where we're using example response. Instead, should be using example body.
Well, it's going to only be in the post. Yeah. So that will be right here.
No, up one. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, a little laggy here. So this is example body. All right. And let me just run the tests.
You said you're having a little bit of lags issues. Did it just start?
Yeah, it's been a little.
Okay, my computer's decided to do a backup, so I'm going to just eject all my external drives.
Thanks for doing a backup.
Yeah. It's got Time Machine, right? So it just goes.
Yeah. I actually turned off Time Machine. There's a tool that basically will do Time Machine, but it'll respect your hours. So I use that. So do we want to do a commit? I feel like we made some changes that deserve a commit.
Have we done that much?
Well, we renamed an example response and added example body.
I don't think we're done with the example body yet, but once we're done with that, we should
Okay.
commit.
Okay.
But down here, getter and poster tracked. Here we have posted body. Posted body.
So that's here.
Yeah, and this should be new example body.
Yeah.
And this is where we do need the string
Right.
body.
Yeah. And then this will have to be body.
And then here, example body dot class.
Yeah, so this one the signature needs to change because we actually need to pass in both. We need to pass in what are we sending out through the post, and then what do we expect the return type to be. And right now we've not actually specified the return type. So for now this is okay.
But it's not going to be okay.
It's not going to be okay as soon as we write the next.
Yeah.
Test.
And how does this post even work? Because where is post over here?
It's actually there it is, and it calls the exchange.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the class. It should be the actual new example body. Irrelevant.
Oh, right. It is the actual. Oh, that's right. We don't need the type for outgoing. We just need the type for incoming because it's not. It only needs the type when actually it has to instantiate it. All right.
That should all still work, right?
Well, the tests at least say it does.
Do you want me to check that in?
Yes.
Okay. So we've introduced split example DTO into example response and example body.
Right.
Okay.
All
great.
right. So now we can finally write this next test. Right. I think we can. So that's going to be. Do you want to interleave these posts and gets?
I don't have a strong opinion about it. My first assumption was we would have them like all the gets and all the posts. Because they're so similar, it's actually kind of nice having them next to each other like this.
Yeah, I think at least for writing them, it makes sense. Whether you want to change the order later, I don't know.
Yeah.
So is this true? Null post returns single configured instance forever.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying? Yeah.
I think it's exactly the same test, except for the gets become posts.
So sort of what comes to mind for me, I don't see any obvious way to generalize it.
Yeah, it makes me feel a little hinky.
Yeah.
Doing the exact same thing, but I'm more comfortable with repeating myself in tests than I am in production code.
So it's funny. I've really been thinking a lot about that. And less and less I'm finding that I'm okay with that.
Really?
Yeah, because so sometimes it's just the setup part. Like there, I really, really do want to encapsulate the setup.
Yes.
But even like here, I think we could, and then I think what it comes down to is a readability issue. If you encapsulate the setup and give it a name, then it's probably more readable than it was before. Suiji mentioned this because he quoted GPod. It's like if you just copy pasted this stuff, then really think about what you're doing. And so it got me thinking that I feel like I've been too, not undisciplined, but basically just too ready to say, yeah, it's test code, so I'm happy with copying and pasting. And just finding that over time, that's gotten me into trouble because something changes and now I have to change a whole bunch of tests.
Yeah.
Mostly it's the setup, but I'm finding it's even in some other cases. So
I agree with you on that for sure, especially the setup. Yeah. And it's something that in the Java code, I feel like we could be more aggressive about factoring out the common setup. And it's not just the setup. It's like, well, like this stuff here, the irrelevant headers and the irrelevant body. in JavaScript, I'm very likely to just make a post method that does it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm less likely to do it in Java because doing optional parameters is so much more of a pain in the butt.
Oh yeah, optional parameters is almost really not worth it. Yeah.
What'd you say?
I would not do optional. I would not do this as optional parameters. And so the only thing I would think of here is there anything we could refactor in the test? Well, I guess it would be an overloaded, but it doesn't make sense to have this as overloaded. Because the only time you don't care about the headers and bodies in the test.
That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, okay.
That's the refactoring I'll do. I'll say URL configured and the response example response.class. And that's a very easy refactoring to do that will clean up the code pretty nicely. Because you end up with all these parameters that you don't end up caring about so much.
So what this leads me to believe is so three options. Leave the duplication. Do a refactor where you're calling the post where we basically refactor this call as a test helper method. I don't like that because now what production code are you calling? But that's one option where basically you're only passing into that. The other is have the overloaded method in the production code that has defaults, reasonable defaults for these. That's weird too, because when would you ever use that in production code?
Yeah, I mean, reasonable defaults I will put in the production code, but only if they're reasonable. Sometimes it's like, no, it does not make sense to do a post without a body.
Right. Although sometimes
it does make sense to do a post without special headers.
Yeah. Certainly without headers.
That may not be the best example. Well, maybe we don't expect a response, so it's okay to not have a response come back. I think what we should do is get this working and then decide.
Yeah, it's just been sort of on my mind lately, and this test sort of like triggered that. What's going on here?
I went through a phase where I was really aggressive about not having a duplication in my tests. Here's the flip side of it. And what I found was that I was factoring stuff out too soon, and later tests had different assumptions, and it actually was much, much more difficult to work with. So actually, given the choice between duplication and wrong abstraction, duplication is easier to deal with.
So I think it depends on the tools, right? Because I've run into that in tests where I've been a little bit more prone to refactor and extract it into a method. It's like, oh, this one needs a different one line here in the setup. Okay, inline it and then re-extract it. And that's almost no work in Java code.
It's the same in JavaScript. I mean, inline and extract work just fine in JavaScript.
Yeah. So to me, it's in tests, it's actually, I'm less worried about abstraction because usually the abstraction is right there. It's not like it's spread throughout the code and everybody's using it, and now you're using an incorrect abstraction. Anyway, so I'm just really thinking about this a lot about the because I used to be like, oh, it's test code, so duplication is fine. I'm trying to lean the other way.
With Yacht, where you ran into a case where it was insufficiently.
Yeah.
I think for me the balance I find is I do try to factor out the duplication. I do try to make the test easy to read as I'm doing that. And it's more the setup that I'm really aggressive about factoring out.
Yeah, and
it's definitely I don't care so much.
Exactly, and so for sure I've very much swung the other way in terms of putting up with duplication. And if it's the setup that's duplicated, if I'm copying pasting the setup, I will be much more aggressive about that. Because that is generally where, that's probably the 80-90% of where the problems I've encountered are. Even yesterday I was working on some code. It was just like, it wasn't a problem. It's just unreadable. Like I had to figure out, I'm sure Suiji was looking at the code, was like, I have no idea what this is doing. And so not understanding what it's doing, by that definition alone means that a refactor would have helped.
Yeah. Well, I think the immediate problem we're facing right now is that post does not take a response class.
Right.
So let's get that working, and then we'll come back. I mean, the other thing that I look at is just how much fits on a page. Like, how much can I read at once?
Yeah.
And so this has gotten big and complicated, and now it's taking up a lot of visual weight. So, but
So let's see. Should we just
so
add this
over
as a
on the
first?
right, on line 47, yeah, we need to add class of T to the response, right?
Yeah. So let's do it as this, and then we can change it. Oops.
Which is class, I believe.
Oh, what did it do? Actually, let me undo that. Sorry. So we're saying that. And that.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
I think you're making your life way too difficult here. We need it to be just like this.
Oh, because we also need to return. Okay, yeah.
And why are we getting an error here?
Oh, because we're supposed to return something. So our exchange is gonna.
Well, before you do that, let me fix the magic way you were doing it would have done it automatically.
But there was only one other usage, so I was probably overzealous.
Yeah,
or two other uses. Still probably overzealous.
I was all on board with you doing it, but once you couldn't figure it out, I was like, let's just type it in. Okay,
so now we need to return something.
So on line 41, we're returning .get body. Can we do the same thing?
So let's see.
What's exchange return?
Yes.
I know what it is.
Because it's this. Yep. So this should be the converter response type. Yep. There we go. Okay. So now oh, and of course in our source code we aren't doing that. Right. So what do we expect? No, that's not it.
Void.class?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where does it go? Wait a minute.
Oh, it goes on line 24 after.
Oh, that's why. So it's basically here.
No, it's
stuck in here. That's why. Yeah, that's it. And so this will be void.class for now. And the type. That looks really ugly.
You might want to reorder those so the body comes last.
So let's do that. Okay. And we want to reorder this?
Not yet. Let's get all the tests passed first.
Let's not forget to reorder. All right, so why is... Because the return value is null. Which of course it is.
Probably because we are just returning null.
Right.
Do me a favor and close the... I just like being able to see more of the code at once.
So the exchange. Yeah.
So if we come down to the bottom where we've got the stubbed template wrapper.
So let me oops.
There should be an exchange a little bit lower.
Right.
Right there.
Yep.
We need to just say basically what the get for entity is doing.
So where is that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yep. Go ahead.
I think that's it.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember the first time we did this, we had to go through all kinds of hell figuring out how Spring's response entity stuff worked.
Right.
This time it just worked.
Yeah.
I don't know how it worked. So that was a little bit of copy paste, but 3 strikes in your refactor. 2's fine. 2 times is just fine.
So let's see. So not that. So this is right. So this is returning the configured value 3 times. Okay, great. Do we want to do a commit?
Not yet. I want to revisit the question of, is this the right order for these parameters?
Oh, right. I asked you to remind me, and you did.
So do we want to move the class be after the URL to be more like the get?
Let's see. From the yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll just take that and we'll move it there.
Let's see, how does it look like from the call side? Yeah, so
oh, that was great.
I love multi-caret.
Okay, and then before we commit, we had a question about how much refactoring we wanted to do here. I'm not ready to make that call yet. I think I want to see what the other tests look like first.
Yeah, so what came to my mind before, and I don't know if I actually said it out loud, was like a parameter object can sometimes help. So instead of having a post with 4 parameters, you have a post with a single parameter as a parameter object, and then that gets easier to create and sort of reuse. That would make the test nicer. Whether it would make the use of the code more awkward is a separate question.
Yeah, I don't think it would improve the code. The direction I was thinking is sort of what Suiji is saying, which is we could have an assert post
and
returns value.
Right. And so basically raise the level of abstraction of what you're doing there. Yeah. Yeah.
But again,
I'm not quite
that's why I want to see
that's
the
worth
other
it. Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that we're going to do it so often as to be worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because every time you introduce an abstraction, you do make things a little bit more complicated to understand. So I think there's a real fine line between duplication and abstraction.
Yeah, and so for
one way or the other.
Yeah, so for tests, it's have you removed too much detail? Even though you want to hide some detail, have you really removed too much where now people are constantly having to look at the implementation to figure out what it's doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the cost.
And that's why I like, again, in JavaScript, where it's easy to do optional parameters, in C# and other languages with optional parameters. That's why I like if these were all one-liners, having 3 lines next to each other, because it's really only, each of these is only 2 statements. And we could, we could actually simplify it a little bit, or at least tidy it a little bit like this. But if it was just this, it's accepting how long it is.
So what's interesting is because
That
the
doesn't
two
bother me.
irrelevant parts are at the end, I actually don't mind this.
That's interesting. Because this already feels tons better.
Yeah,
like it's just how
exactly.
big it is. That's the problem.
Yeah. Like I'm fine with that because the irrelevant stuff is at the end, like,
Okay.
and it's really clear how to connect the response with the configured value. I still might push the equal to the next line just because that's my default.
That's sort of your style.
Yeah. But even that doesn't. It was really the post that just had so many parameters.
And it was because we added more parameters and I spread it out onto multiple lines that it was really such a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. So what have we done here?
What have we done?
Oh my God, what have you done?
Post now returns a response.
It's actually the nulled.
The nulled post
returns
at least single configured response.
I think we're going to discover.
Oh, because we're leveraging the code that was already there.
Yeah, I think what we're going to discover is, let's just do it, actually.
The next test will pass.
Take this next one. And duplicate it. And this is going to be irrelevant headers and irrelevant body.
Yep.
See, actually, this is a case where I might do an overload for the headers and the body in the production code. Because
yes, exactly. Because exactly. Yes.
Oops.
I was going to do the multi-caret, but all right.
I was about to, actually.
I was going to do multi-caret on inserting the irrelevant pieces.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Now I expect this to just work right out of the box. In fact, let's make sure the new test is actually even running.
Thank you for doing that. I'd like to see it fail. And it failed for the right reason. Yep.
Okay.
Do we want to commit and then remove and then create an overload?
Let's hold that thought, because I had something else, which is that we could. This test isn't adding a lot of value.
Mm-hmm.
I'm inclined to take this test and do something like this and just say nulled post can be configured just like get. Because we really, once we wrote one of these, we've written all of them, right? In which case I might even, I'll undo this if you don't agree, but I'm kind of saying take this put this below all the nulled gets and call it good for the null post. We're effectively done on what this code needs to be, what needs to be written for this code.
I'm not 100% sure.
You're not 100% sure
that this is okay.
That this is okay. Do you agree that we've written all the production code that needs to be written? I mean, other than maybe some refactorings.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I think this is sort of an interesting philosophical question. Do we need to test everything that it does, or do we just need to write enough tests to drive the new implementation that we need to write?
Yeah, and so this is where, this is not TDD. This is what kind of tests do we want to have?
Right.
Because certainly it doesn't drive any new behavior, and so now,
well, like Luigi just said, we'd
Yeah.
only write green tests from this point on.
right,
If we wrote the other tests,
Right.
we'd only write green tests.
right, and so what is the value of doing that?
So I see I've gone both ways on this.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older and more impatient, I've swung one way, but that doesn't mean it's the right way. Yeah, I think Suiji's capturing it. They might be valuable in other ways. It used to be I would be fairly thorough in my testing even when they weren't necessary, so that I would catch errors in the future. And these days, my philosophy is I only write tests when the code needs it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm generally on the same page. This one makes me a little nervous only because get and post may have more differences that we haven't.
They could end up diverging more.
Yeah.
Or maybe my perception is just wrong, and that actually is going to be some differences that we're not aware of yet.
And so that's just, so that's where, I'm also balancing with like how many additional, like how much more tests are we talking about?
I think if it was me alone, I would have stopped here, but I think the concerns you're raising are pushing, like, even if you said, no, I'm good with it, I would actually say, no, let's go ahead and finish them out. I think you've convinced me.
I mean, what I might do is just do 2 configures. Like instead of having 3 responses, I would just do 2.
Mm-hmm.
And for the different configured instances, I would just do 2, mainly just to save space. But maybe even that's not worth it, because now it's like, why are these different?
Exactly. Yeah. I would actually leave them the same.
Yeah.
I think rather than checking in, though, since we haven't really done anything, let's put in the rest of the tests.
Okay.
And then commit.
All right.
So we should be able to just barrel through these, I'm thinking. This does not work the way I think it's going to.
Yeah, and so this is where I might be thinking about almost parameterizing the tests.
I don't like parameterizing tests.
I don't do it a lot, but there's something about this, and this, there are a couple of ways to do it. Is either we create sort of a higher level assertion, or we sort of parameterize the test with the lambda of what method are we actually calling, because everything else is, because that's really the only difference between these 2 tests.
Mm-hmm.
Is, are we calling post or get?
Yeah, which bugs me for sure.
Especially since the difference with the post is irrelevant stuff, just to be happy with dummies, and we already talked about it. We might even remove that. So. So you're playing out the parameters, because presumably if you're doing a post, you're probably not going to have query parameters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And just because I'm not sure why the query parameters were there in the first place, they're not relevant to this test. That was just a deliberate.
Oh, okay.
Failure. Okay. And then I'm going to do it this way and say based on URI, because we only have the one.
Right.
Why this is failing? Oh, because it's still get.
Oh, one too far. Yep. Good.
We'll go away. Yeah, the amount of duplication in these tests is definitely bugging me, but I'm not seeing a clean way of fixing it is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, we could refactor the setup for the copies, but again, it's like I'm not sure. It's really the post assert, and get assert. That's the sort of more verbose than I would like it to be.
Yeah, and we could definitely factor. We could take a lot of these and just turn them into assert post succeeded, assert get succeeded.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and check in.
Yep.
And I think I'm just going to amend the previous commit because we haven't done
right
here. It can be configured with responses.
Yep.
And configure.
So Sweetie says the missing abstraction of different ways to set up configurable responses.
So I think Suiji might be getting at the point that the configurable responses are a little bit weird. I'm not sure. Actually, I'm not sure what he's getting at.
I mean, this is here. You could inline that.
We could.
I don't know how much that helps, though.
I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt.
Option. Yeah.
Tried all the different meta keys plus in. Found it eventually.
Yes.
I do think. I actually think that reads more friendly.
I think that's good. That's better.
And we can do that here, here, and here. We're already doing it here.
Right, we're doing it there. Yep.
When I am looking at a design question and the answer isn't obvious within, a little while of staring at it and talking about it, my response is say, well, that's what collective ownership is for. The next pair to look at this will come up with a better answer.
Right.
And they'll probably talk trash about us. And it'll probably be us talking about trash about ourselves.
Yep.
Well, for this series, it definitely will be. And that's okay,
Yeah, I agree. Like it's very easy to get. I mean, I know, or at least for me, it's really easy to try and perfect things past the point that I actually have an answer for, and a point of diminishing returns for sure.
In the shower. The shower is where all my best thinking happens. I have gotten really comfortable saying, that's terrible. It's the best thing I know how to do.
Yeah.
I'll fix it later.
Yeah.
I think there's a fine line between I'll fix it later and future me will have a better idea.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to say, oh, I'm too lazy to fix that. I see a better way and I just don't want to.
Right.
And I don't like it, but I don't know why I don't like it, so I'll come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, if I same for me. Like, it's like if in my head it's like, oh, I know what this should look like, I just don't feel like doing it. That's one thing, and then I should just do it. But if it's like, I'm not even sure what this looks like.
Sorry, Ted. I thought you were done.
And so if it's I don't even know what better looks like, then it's like, okay, it's good enough.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to do another amend because I removed a blank line.
Yeah.
I think we're good. I think JsonHttpClient is done for now. There's also the question about the overloads for post, but again, on that, I want to come back to that after we've seen it a little bit further, because I don't think we're going to need to parameterize it, but there's no reason the post wouldn't be parameterizable, just like the get. Like there's nothing special about. Well, no, I take that back. You typically wouldn't use query strings on a post. You can, but you generally wouldn't.
You generally don't. Yeah.
Honestly, I think looking at this, the way Spring is doing their HTTP stuff, it's terribly overcomplicated. Like I really dislike it.
It's got sharp edges. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, HTTP is a really simple protocol. It's a URL, it's headers, and it's a body. They have made that very simple triad incredibly complicated. If they just exposed, well, it's method, URL, headers, and body. If they had just exposed method, URL, headers, and body, and maybe some helper methods to convert JSON to string and back, that would have been so much cleaner than this god-awful mess of...
Yeah, because it's trying to do a bunch of different things, and
it's trying way too hard.
And trying to and as Suji says, like web client, which is supposedly the replacement for it, I think is actually much worse.
Yeah.
Because now they have like, oh, and now we need to make it streamable with back pressure and all this. It's like, and reactive. And I'm like,
to be fair, you do need to have the ability to deal with streams in some cases. But for the kind of stuff we're doing, just simple strings.
And in fact, I think in most cases, like I actually honestly don't understand. I wish somebody would show me a good example that's not sort of data pipelines. But anything,
well, no, that is the example. Is
like
when you're...
and like if you're writing raw data pipelines, why? Like you should be using a tool that does that for you. There's so many higher level tools. So like I constantly see these presentations and these articles and even books about using the reactive style. And I'm thoroughly unconvinced that anybody should be writing that. Even if you have your microservices being very chatty, it's like the overhead of trying to basically make stuff async. And I think now, especially with Loom coming in with virtual threads, I think it's a lost cause. And I think it's just a broken way of thinking about it. And I just refuse to adopt web client for that reason, because it's just pointless. Just so useless.
I mean, if you are downloading large blobs, you need to be able to stream it rather than just having it all go in memory. But I'll admit, for the vast majority of glue style code, that's not what you're doing. You're making a request, you're getting a response. You need the whole response back.
And I'd want, if I'm going to be using a framework, then I want it to do that for me. Like, I don't want it to expose the stream. It's like, I want to download a file. Great, give me the file. You figure out, here, push the file here. I don't, either give it to me in memory. If it's too big to memory, put it over here. I'm not in
100% agree with you because maybe you're writing a little transcoding service. So you need to get bytes in from a third party and then encode it using MP16 and then feed it on to your consumer. Like that's a clear use case for a stream, but it's very esoteric. Like,
I guess I feel like it's so esoteric that if you're writing that because you're writing the library, and then everybody else should be just using that library.
And please God, don't use Spring if you're doing that.
Yeah,
like
you're probably using something else.
Yeah, exactly.
VertX comes to mind, which is much better at some of that stuff. Yeah.
So I think streams are a great tool, and I think whatever library you have should support streams. It just doesn't need to be the default.
Yeah.
And all this complexity around the way they've taken a really simple protocol and wrapped all this Spring junk around it, all in the names of making it simpler, but actually really, really hard to understand. Is
hey, that's Spring's way of doing it.
We're
going to wrap a bunch of stuff and then make it harder to understand.
I I'm going to say something maybe a little mildly heretical. There has not been a single use of Spring we've had so far that made me think, oh, that was worthwhile. Like, there's nothing we've used it for where I haven't thought, I just wish we were talking to the underlying JDBC or underlying, Java. If we were just working directly with Java, this would be easier and better. Now, again, that's a little heretical.
Yeah, I mean, our examples
nothing
are
to like about this tool.
Yeah, I mean, and we could have much longer discussion about that. Although I'm not sure I'd provide any useful information because, I've looked at other frameworks like Quarkus and Micronaut and some other ones, and I'm like, they're all doing the same thing. Like they're all frameworks. So like the one I'm really interested in actually trying out at some point is Rife 2, RIFE.
I've heard of it, but I haven't looked at it.
And it seems more rational and reasonable. But
the thing that gets me is, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but my impression of Spring is that it's basically a dependency injection framework that is glommed onto everything else. And once you have dependency injection, you kind of have to own the world because it's a particular way of working that other things have to either adopt or not adopt.
Right.
And so you can't just create a library for other people to consume. If you've got a Spring thing, nobody can use it unless they're using Spring.
Right.
And so these frameworks accumulate this, they accrete this ecosystem of useful things that only work in that ecosystem because they can't be written as a pure function or as just a simple library because they require to be plugged into the dependency injection stuff in order to work at all.
I think it's more because there's a lot of interesting tools and sort of components that started from like Hibernate, for example, started from outside. And however we feel about Hibernate, we won't go there. But like something where there's a huge library, and basically what they did do that was nice is get rid of all the manual boilerplate configuration of hooking the things up, right? So that's the magic of Spring Boot, is the magic auto configuration to wire these things up that that aren't part of Spring Framework. But Spring Framework itself has become what it fought against, right? It's like it fought against the complexity and some really bad design issues of early J2EE. But it has, I don't know. It's really interesting because like, can any framework avoid that? Is it just a natural course of that it starts accreting things that yeah.
This is why I don't like frameworks. Like, give me a library any day. And that does mean if you've got a collection of libraries, then you've got to wire them together. But you know what? It's nice to be able to control that code. And because when you're asking how does, why are these two things not fitting together, you can answer that question. And it's something that for any given project, exactly, Suiji. For any given project, you do that as long as the project is of reasonable size and is going to last for a while. You do that once and then you forget about it. Like, I think a lot of these tools are optimized for the demo, for the tutorial. It's really annoying to do all the wiring in a tutorial, but in a project that's lasting more than a month, you spend a day or two at the beginning of the project doing the wiring up and then you forget about it. You never touch it again.
Yeah, so Drop Wizard is interesting. So Drop Wizard was, I don't know that I'd call it a framework. Maybe it has some frameworkish things, but it basically was a pre-glued set of libraries. So it had the MVC stuff, Jax RS as it's called, and I forget what the actual implementation was. Whatever the implementation was, and it sort of pre-glued some stuff together. I think what Spring Boot does give you, though, is like, if you're not sure what to glue together, the defaults are really good.
I hear that for a lot of frameworks. Like in the JavaScript world, people say, just use whatever front end framework of du jour is, Vite maybe, because they will make all the decisions for you. And I can see the appeal of that. The problem is that you either have to now keep up with all the various, as the framework evolves, they will continue to update those decisions to be what the latest and greatest is.
Right.
And you're going to have to update with them, which is not fun. Or you're stuck with something like the original Angular JS, where it's just out of date now.
Right.
I will actually, when I'm in a new ecosystem, I will go, well, for example, when I was looking at the test libraries, I looked at what the frameworks were all shipping, and then I went and looked at those libraries. Like, I didn't want to use the framework, but I did use it. What is the current hotness, right? What do people think is good? Then, of course, me being me, on brand, as you said, I decided none of those were good enough for me. But still, that's where I started. As I went out and looked, what is sort of the accepted thing that the frameworks are doing. So you can still do that. You can use the frameworks as a source of inspiration, without necessarily, because there's so much that auto wiring, which is not solving that many problems, brings so much baggage.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the bigger problems. Like, I've seen, like, you want to glue stuff together, and it's like, and so what I see in large enterprises is like, we've glued stuff together for 5 different projects. Hey, let's create an internal, it starts out as like, here's your starting skeleton. And it's like, oh, we want to make it configurable, or oh, we want to do this. And it's like, and then you basically now have a team it might be 3 people or 2 people, and they start creating a little bit of a framework, and then that grows, and now you've got, and that just seems the natural sort of evolution inside large companies is to end up there.
And honestly, those frameworks are kind of crappy.
And they're really,
to be fair, I mean,
because they were never designed.
Yeah.
It's not they were poorly designed. They just weren't designed. They just accumulated things. And then you have what we started talking about before, is now you have, disparate needs from different places. And how do you resolve that? And the way you resolve that is saying, I'm not using your framework.
Yeah.
But then it might be too late to abandon it because you're already now on it. Yeah. And so, I'm getting triggered because, like, that exactly happened to me. It's like, I wish I could get off this freaking framework.
Well, I think there are a couple of things going on, and this is probably a bigger conversation than we have time for, given that we're supposed to be done now.
Yeah.
But this is why I'm so interested in fast fluid scaling technology.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of what's going on in companies is based on really only knowing how to be successful with teams of about 5 to 7 programmers, and thus introducing microservices as an organizational technique to isolate those teams.
Yes.
And then those microservices are so small that they don't need a full-time team to maintain them. So the teams end up with many microservices that they're responsible for. And that microservices are really heavyweight. So they've got all this stuff that they've got a lot of glue.
There's
so
a lot of duplication across them.
Stuff. Yep. And so now so I think it all comes back down to, we just don't know how to have large groups of people working together effectively.
Yeah.
And I think if you could have, with fast, this is a theory, I don't know if it's true, but if you could have a 50-person team with fast maintaining a monolith rather than a web of microservices, because really all that microservices are really good at, except for a few cases, is the organizational problem.
Yeah.
Monoliths are just fine if you can get 50 people working together effectively.
Yes.
A service, a macro service rather than a microservice approach with teams of 50 people, I think would solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm really interested in fast, because it gives a path to having teams of 50 people that are effective together.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the problem we ran into. When I was leading the billing team, we had 20 people on the team, and we were constantly, and we were already separated from other projects and separate framework platform team, and we were still stepping on each other's toes because it was a monolith that was relatively well structured, but not enough. Had it been a bit more modularized, I think we actually would have been able to maintain that, but yeah, that's like, I go back to, when people started talking about microservice, this is a great solution for our problem, because I heard about it in 2011, 2012 when I was experiencing that exact problem. It's like, that's great. The problem we ran into was all the support for deploying them wasn't available.
Which is definitely better now.
Which is, yeah. And so it wasn't, and our thing was an out of the box thing. So to say, hey, you now have to, on your systems, install 4 services instead of 1, that was a bridge too far.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, it's our time.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a couple minutes debriefing, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So we did 2 things today. We spent the first half of the stream looking at the question of buy versus build, and looking at the custom build, which I think has ended up in a pretty nice place, actually. Let me pull that up. So now we should be able to do a build quick, and a watch quick, and make a change to a single file like hello tsx. Yep, and it just recompiles that one. I love that.
Yep.
And so that was the first half of the stream. And then the second half of the stream, we added configurable responses to HTTPClient. So thoughts on what we did today?
Yeah, the build stuff was interesting, at least to me. I'm always thinking, like, do I want to write my own? I don't know if I want to write my own build thing for Java, but I definitely have thought about writing my own unit testing, and not because JUnit is necessarily bad, but I actually think it's really, and I've seen some articles about it, about people writing them just to say, what is actually going on today, the sort of demystifying that, I think actually is really important, because a lot of these unit test things, they look magical, or it's like it's unclear what's going on, what are they doing. So I think demystifying that is really great.
And it's actually quite simple, especially with the more modern approach. Like the original JUnit was all reflection based. The more modern approach is just use lambdas, like call a function and pass in the test function you want to run as your test. And that's it. It's very simple and straightforward.
Yeah. And the, returning the stuff and that reusability from the get stuff that was already there, that was really nice. It was like, we could just use that. And boom, we're pretty much done. Most of the time was spent just copying tests.
and BSing and agonizing over design.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I love. So my reaction is builds are totally my bag, baby. Like I will. I love automated builds. And putting time into automated builds and getting the build down to less than a second. That fast feedback is just so incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And there's a world difference between less than a second and less than 5 seconds. And then 5 to 10 seconds is feels slow. And then once you have more than 10 seconds, it's just a night and day difference in what you can accomplish.
Yep.
So I'll put a lot of effort in my builds.
Yeah.
And it's something that's important to me. And I think really makes a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, I'm with you. Sorry, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say it's definitely over the 5 seconds. And like that, that's just our cognitive architecture. We start losing our context because it starts fading from our short-term memory. So I'm not quite as like I'm okay with 2 to 3 seconds. Anything that starts approaching 5 seconds, I'm starting to get concerned.
I used to be a lot less. Like I used to be like, 8 or 9 seconds. It's not great, but I'll take it. And now that I've had the experience of being able to get very consistent, like less than a second builds, it's
addictive.
It's amazing because it's basically you. And I don't know if it's been coming through the microphone, but of course I've got sound set up. So you press save, you get a sound feedback. You don't even have to take your eyes off the code. It's just like poof, 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 poof. Yeah. It's such a game changer. Being able to have that kind of feedback.
Yeah, transfers exactly. It's like if you want to use computers as an analogy, which we always seem to do, it's like that's actually the on-chip cache gets drained because we start thinking about other things.
And the HTTP client stuff, I think that was just sort of getting the work done, and I'm looking forward to next time continuing on OpenAiClient and seeing those responses come back. Yeah. So I think that's what we're going to do next time.
That's what we're going to do next time.
All right.
All right, folks. Thanks for joining us. Join us next week as we do that. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.